Hey everybody, thanks so much for joining us here today. Today we are covering compositing made easy with the new photoFXlab ReMask, and we're going to be taking a look at a couple other plugins as well to blend the images together. So if you're wondering what a composite image is, basically it's the process of combining multiple images, two or more images for your final composition. So whether that's replacing a background, maybe adding a texture, or even adding multiple images for a photo collage, all of those are considered compositing. I am going to be using the new photoFXlab as the host here today. However, the Topaz ReMask as well as your other plugins are going to be compatible with Photoshop Elements, Aperture, Lightroom, iPhoto, etc. You can check our compatibility online if you want to take a look at that. Let's go ahead and get rid of this. All right, but again, we are going to be working with the photoFXlab as our host today because part of the new compositing method that I'm going to be showing you is going to be using this edge-aware masking tools. So let's first take a look at replacing backgrounds. That's a pretty constant technique that photographers utilize, and there's several different ways to do it. And I find that, especially with that edge-aware masking for certain images, it makes it really, really, really easy. So let's open an image here. And I'm going to use this not only to show how to replace a background in a really simple background like this using the new edge-aware masking, but also we're going to use this image for texture to show how to texture using the new layered workflow and the blending methods that we have within that within the layers palette. So let's first talk about just replacing a background. This is obviously a really simple background, and you can quickly replace the background using not only the edge-aware masking tools but also Topaz ReMask. So we're going to go over both of those methods pretty quickly here, and then we'll jump into some more complicated masking jobs. So I'm just going to go ahead and duplicate this image. If you need an introduction to photoFXlab, this really isn't the right webinar for that. I'll explain a couple things about this, but if you need an introduction, we do have that online on our YouTube channel. It's youtube.com/topazlabs, and that'll give you a much more thorough intro into all of the features that are in this new Topaz hub. I've made a duplicate of my image just because that's how I always start off usually. Over here, it's very easy to do so in this layers palette. This is a simplified layers workflow. I just pressed duplicate to make my copy, and you'll see that copy now up here. And now I'm going to bring in my background image. It's very easy to do so from right over here in your layers workflow, and you can just say from file. I'm just going to grab this background of the clouds. So we have a little bit more of a good looking background than this just really bland sky that we currently have. So I'm going to say open. When I open that up, background will open on top of the layer that was highlighted. So it's sitting here on top of it. It's much smaller, so I need to go ahead and do a couple things. First, I need to resize this layer and make it the size of my original layer, and then I also need to drag it below my foreground. So the first thing that I would do is come up here to my tools palette, and I'm going to go to scale and just scale this up pretty quickly with the slider. Now that I have it about the same size, I'm happy, and I'm going to come down to the layers, and I'm just going to drag and drop it below my foreground. So now I have my original image back on top, my background below that, and we're going to mask two different ways, one with the edge-aware masking and one with Topaz ReMask, to get this background to show through the kind of plain background that we have here. So if you're not familiar with edge-aware masking, if you have Topaz Adjust or Topaz Black and White Effects, it's basically the same brush panel, except we use it for masking as opposed for just the selective brushes. We also have the selective brushes within photoFXlab, but we've incorporated that edge-aware technology in those brushes for masking. It's making masking very easy for certain imagery and makes it go very quickly for more complicated masks that have a more simple background, such as trees and that type of mask. So my brush value is going to go from 0 to 255. This is going to be 0 at black, 255 white. So whatever my value is the amount of transparency that's going to be painted onto the mask that I'm working on. Down here on my layers, there's a white box next to my image thumbnail, and that is my layer mask that we're going to be working on. So if my brush value is at 0, which is black, it's going to, let's make this hardness kind of up, it's going to give me a black dot on this white layer mask, which means I can see completely transparent, or makes the area transparent where I paint with my brush to see directly below. If I have, let's say, a more mid-tone 133 brush value and I make the same dot, it's not going to be as transparent. I'm not going to see as much of that background. And you can see that over here on the lower right where you see your black dot and then the mid-gray dot. So that gives you an idea of what that brush value really means. I'm going to say reset, and I'm going to take that down to 0. Because I do want to paint with the black. The brush size, as you move that up and down, you'll see your brush size move. The brush size is important within this edge-aware masking, and we'll go over that shortly. The hardness is going to be the inner circle of your brush, and you'll see that go up and down. And when you're at 1, you get a completely hard brush stroke. So we just did 1 click and you'll see that circle right there. There's absolutely no transition. When I take my hardness all the way down and I make the exact same 1 click, you'll see it's a much softer brush that has a much gentler transition to the outside of the brush. Let me go ahead and reset my mask and get rid of that. The flow is going to be basically how quickly the ink, whatever color you've set your brush value at, comes out of your brush. So I'm going to keep it at 1, so it's going to be the full strength, the full amount of ink coming out at once, just for this presentation. And then the edge-aware is where the technology really starts to get exciting for this particular area. When the edge-aware is set at 1, that's full strength edge-aware. Let me go ahead and take this all the way down to 0, and that's basically just a normal brush. It's kind of what we call a dumb brush. It doesn't have any sort of detection in it. I'm going to take my hardness a little up, brush size, and I'm going to paint right next to the statue, the horse's face here, right next to his ear. And I just made 1 click. At 0, with my edge-aware down all the way, you'll see that it didn't detect the edges. It not only brought the background in from the layer below on the sky, but also on the horse, and that's not what we want. So let me say reset and take this edge-aware all the way up to 1 and make that exact same brush stroke or click. And you'll see now that the brush detected the edge of the horse's face and the sky. The way that it detects, this edge-aware technology works, is it detects by color. So whatever color your middle of your brush, there's a little crosshairs there, whatever color that's on is what it's going to affect. Now, this is really great when you have a strong contrast like this type of background and foreground. Makes it much easier to detect those edges, and you can quickly get a very good mask without much work at all. Where it starts to fail, or where I say, Topaz ReMask can step in and really do a much better job, is when you start to get a much more where the colors start to get very close on the edges. So we'll go over one of those types of landscape images here after this. But let's just go along the edges here of the horse and just bring in that background. Now I want you to notice as I'm going around on the background, as I get close to the horse's, let's show a little bit closer. As I get in certain areas, you'll notice that some of it becomes a little bit translucent. This is because of my brush size. So let's just make a couple, there we are. Make a couple more strokes so you can kind of see that it's affecting the edges not a great way. Now it's not too bad right now. Let me reset that and show you with my brush size way up. You can kind of see it affecting the areas that you don't want it to affect. It kind of affects the edges a little much. So the way that you can control that with the edges is going to be your brush size. So let's reset this one more time. Take the brush size down. And I'm still going along the same area, except my brush size is a little bit farther down. And it's much easier to not affect anything except what I want it to. So that's the edge-aware technology. It's very quick. This is great for going in between trees and areas where you have a pretty constant color of the background. It can be really, really quick, and we'll go over that as well. Let me go back to fit so you can see the whole thing. Take my brush size a little up, and we're going to just do this really quickly. And you can see how fast this really is. It's detecting those edges. Now, as you go around the edges, sometimes you'll see, right now I'm just doing one brush stroke, one long brush stroke. There are certain areas like, let's see here, between the shoulder and hindquarters of the horse, on that, there's a little bit of a halo right there. It didn't quite fill in. All you need to do to fill that in is just go back and just do a couple clicks, and it'll fill that in and really make that a strong edge. Same thing all around. Oops, that was a little close there. So around the head, I'm doing the same thing. So I can quickly just get rid of any halos that I see by making little clicks right next to it. And we're just going to continue going around the edge. Make a couple clicks to fill in the areas where I need to. Go inside here into my negative space. Quickly get that filled in. And we are good pretty much all the way around the horse now. Let me get right underneath his chin. There we are. And I'm pretty happy. Now all I need to do is take my edge-aware down now. I'm going to take my edge-aware all the way down, my hardness much more high, and just kind of make a couple more strokes around the horse. And make my brush size even more large now, and I can just really fill it in really quickly with this brush. So that is how easy using this edge-aware masking can be when compositing images. Now again, this is somewhat of a very simple mask in the sense that the original background here was very easy to deal with. But I do want to show you kind of the technology of each masking way, and then we'll go into a couple more workflows. So that is how you use the edge-aware technology. Now, if you wanted to use this instead with ReMask, let's go back to our mask. We're going to reset it, and we're going to jump into ReMask by going to our Plugins tab over here on the left and going to Topaz ReMask Start Plugin. It's going to pull it up, and you'll see a ReMask interface right away. For this particular more easy mask like this, I would actually start out with my, we also have an introduction to ReMask. We're not really going to introduce you to ReMask today, just show you different ways to use the compositing through the layers and blending, etc. So definitely check that out if you're not familiar with ReMask. But I would start out with a full compute blue area. If you're unfamiliar, I will tell you the one thing that you definitely need to know is green is keep, red is cut, and blue is compute. And usually it starts off with blue or red, and then you just start painting a blue or the blue compute brush where you need it to compute, and then fill in the areas of red and stuff like that. But because our background is so simple, I'm going to start off with blue, and what I'm going to do is use the single color selection tool, select this background, and just start painting. And it'll paint just the color that I select, that blue, and it will not select anything else. So pretty easy here. Just to quickly get all of that blue. There's a bit of a gradient in my sky, so I'll need to go ahead and click that as well and get all of that to be green. Now I can, and actually it should have been red. That's okay, we'll just invert our mask. Now we'll cut our statue, even though I should have done it the other way around, but you'll get the idea. All I'm doing is selecting the color real quick and grabbing and just painting, not really even taking any sort of consideration because this is such an easy mask. Again, I just want to show you the benefits of each, and then we'll move on here. There we go. Let me take my color range a little up. The color range, I just saw that was a question. What is the color range? When you're working with your single color selection and your dual color selection brushes, it actually has a tolerance level, your brush, for the color that you're selecting. If your tolerance level is low at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it's only going to select a very, very small range of the color that you selected. If your color level or color range is a little bit more high, like it is right now, it will select much more of that color range and really allow you to get a lot of that type of color. And since, again, this is somewhat of a simple background, it's easy just to use that color range, kind of take it up quite high and be able to select it all really quickly. Almost done here. Okay, basically we have a pretty good mask here now, and I can go ahead and say compute. You'll see that it's very well done because we did select everything very easily, and the background is completely kept actually, and the statue is actually cut. I'm just going to say OK, and you'll see that that is what happened, but I'm just going to invert my mask by clicking on invert over here in my masking area, and now I have the background that I want and the foreground that I want. So that's basically how I would composite these two images in the background replacement using either of these technologies. Now I want to go ahead and show you a different way to composite images. We're going to go into background replacement a little bit more, but with this particular image I want to show you how to really use textures with the blending modes that we have in our layers palette within photoFXlab. I love adding texture to certain images. I think it just really works and really gives you a beautiful composite image in the end. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of these top two layers. Just press delete and get back to my original image, and I'm going to make a copy by just pressing duplicate, and now I have a copy again. In these kind of older type of statue images, sometimes adding layers and really getting a lot of, or adding texture can really add something a little extra to these types of images. Because I can sit here and I can come and change my saturation and change my dynamics and really start to make this pop quite easily, but it's not necessarily going to give me a really interesting composition at this point, or something that I really want to look at. So I like to add texture in it sometimes and see how it looks. So that's what we're going to do here today. So at this point I would just say from file, and I'd grab my texture. I think I'm going to grab this kind of grunge background that has a lot of these stripes in it and say open. Now it's pretty green for this particular image, but I'll show you how we're going to work with it. I am going to go ahead and scale it to be the right size. About right here will work. And then I'm going to drag, or actually I'm not going to drag it anywhere. I'm going to keep it right here. I don't really want the green look to this grunge, so I am going to come up to the saturation slider in my adjustments and just kind of take it down a little bit. So it's kind of taking a lot of that green out, and I'll just take some of that tint up towards magenta to kind of get a more natural type of color. Now I can come over into my blending modes. We're going to use the blending modes and the opacity to really make it work with this layer below with our actual subject, and then we're going to take it into a plugin to finish it off. So the first thing I would do is come to my blending modes. Blending modes basically tell the layer that's selected how to interact with the layer below it. So you can, to see how these blending modes work, I'd say the best way within at least photoFXlab is just to come here and just start dragging, just start scrolling down, and you'll see so many different types of looks and so many different types of reactions to each other with these different blending modes. So it just depends on how you want to apply this texture to your image. I really enjoy using the overlay and soft light for adding texture. I think it does a really good job of it. There's also hard light here, which does really good. Let's see here. We're going to scroll all the way down just to see what maybe grabs our attention. And I think it's down to overlay, soft light, or hard light. I think I'm going to go for, we'll do hard light actually. So I'm going to choose hard light. This is still a little heavy-handed for me, and I've kind of lost my subject. I'm more interested in the texture itself at this point. So that's where the opacity would come in. Right now, even though it is blending with this hard light blending mode with my subject, with the statue, it's still a little strong. So I could come over to my opacity and just start taking that down. And what it's going to do is as you start taking it towards 0, it's going to become more and more and more translucent. As it goes to 100, it's going to become more and more strong. So you can just come in and play and figure out what works for you and what look you're after. I'm going to go about 60%, and I'm pretty happy with that. I'm starting to like the older feeling that I'm getting here. It's starting to go in the direction I want it to. I am going to change the contrast of this texture. Just go down just a little. Okay, so that starts to change the contrast, make it a little less contrasty, a little less in your face type of texture. And then I'm going to go to the layer below, which is my subject, and work with that just a little bit more. I'm going to take the dynamic even more up. I love this dynamic slider. Basically, this dynamic slider is Topaz Adjust in one slider for that adaptive exposure. It's very cool, except it doesn't give you that more grungy look that that Topaz can give you, Topaz Adjust can give you. Okay, let's see here. A couple other things, just changing my exposure a little bit. My saturation is up quite a bit, that's okay. I'm going to take my highlights down just a little, my whites down just a little, and I'm pretty happy. But at this point, I now want to take this into my black and white effects. I want to give it an even more old-timey feel, more toned feel. And this is, I think, is going to be really good for this particular image. However, right now I have these 3 separate layers, so I can only take one layer in at a time, and that's really not what I want to do. I want to take this entire image into Topaz black and white effects. I want to take this composite. So that's when I would come over to my layer stack and press this from stack button. Basically, this is a stamp layer where it's going to look at the layer you're on and everything below, and it's going to make one layer out of those. So now I'm going to turn off all of these other layers below, and I now have this one layer on top that combines all of the layers below. So now I can take everything all at once into Topaz black and white effects. Just going to click on that, and well, there we are. Let me press reset all, and I think I'm already starting to like what I'm seeing. Black and white effects can give you some really cool tones, not as, this is more just a warm tone, traditional silver gelatin type of look. You can get some more toned much more heavy-handed tones within the toned collection. But I really like the platinum collection. It's going to make everything a little bit more matte. Let's click this first one. A little bit less contrasty, but give it that platinum type of look. So I think I'll work with that. I know that I like the platinum 1, but I also like, yes, this platinum 8 as well. Much more matte looking, and it starts to really make this image look feel much more older, and this texture really starts to belong when it's in this monotone type of feeling. So I'm just going to come into my conversion tab, maybe add just a little bit of contrast in here. Get my blacks back up a little bit and my whites. Go into my adaptive exposure and maybe add just a little bit of adaptive exposure. Yeah, not too much. And I'm not going to protect my highlights or my shadows for this one. Get a little bit more contrast. All right, and when you're happy, all you have to do is press OK, and it's going to be applied to the layer that you brought into the plugin, just like it would be in other programs. And there you have it. That is how you can easily combine textures or bring textures into your image using blending modes and your opacity levels and really make it blend well with certain images. All right, so next we're going to talk about collages, photo collages. With this layers area, it's very easy to bring in several different types of images or several different images, combine them all together in one single collage and have something really special. You can do that using your tools and then using the plugins to really make the images pop out. So that's what we're going to do here today. Let me go ahead and X out of this image. I'm not going to save it. And I'm going to first start off with a background. And the background here that I'm using, and the texture that I also used before, was a background from Photobax, one of the free ones that they gave out to Topaz users. But you can get backgrounds from anywhere. You can purchase them on stock photography like Photobax or Layer Cake Elements. Also, you can get them for free off of Stock Exchange and different free stock places for your backgrounds. So lots of places to get textures and backgrounds. So if I want to start off, I like to start off with a background just to begin my collage. I might change the background once we get into it, but this is a good background to start off with. And I'm just going to start adding my images that I want to add in. So let's see here. I'm just going to come down to my From File. I'm going to make a collage of my niece and her dog. I would just start grabbing images that I want to include in this collage. So here's the first one. I can come up to my tools since I'm on that layer and just scale that down or up. So maybe right about there. I can also use my mouse tool to go diagonally up or down to scale as well. And then my move tool to move it exactly where I needed it to go. You just click on the move tool, and again you can use your mouse to drag it, or you can use the arrow keys to be a little bit more exact. There's also the rotation tool, which you can use your mouse with by going up or down. And you can come over here into the module and actually use this little arrow to make it spin, go crazy, and you can use the flip tools, flip horizontal or vertical, 90-degree clockwise or 90-degree counterclockwise. I'm going to go back to my move tool and maybe just move that exactly where I want it to go and bring in my new image. Bring in another image from the From file. So let's just bring in a few here. We'll grab that image. Go up to my tools, go through that same process. It'll get very quick with your mouse. If you're using photoFXlab to be able to do this, you just have to use your mouse tool to quickly move, rotate, and scale. From File, go ahead and grab a couple more here, open up, go through that same process, go up to Tools, Scale, scale that down to where I want it to be, and then move it to where I want it to go. I'm going to scale that a little bit less. And I kind of want to flip it a little bit. So I'm going to go to my rotate and flip it horizontally. And then I'm going to stick in my rotate and just rotate it a little bit. Just a little, not much. And bring in one more image for this lower left area. So this is how quick it can go within this new program and within these layers in the tool palette here. Let's see here. I'll grab one of them on the back of the truck here. Okay. Tools, scale it down, move it over, and rotate it just a little. This isn't going to be perfect for this, but I just wanted to show you how easy it really is to create these collages. This is great if you're trying to do some sort of collage with portraits or anything like that. You can also come in and really have a lot of fun if you mask out people, and then you can use this opacity slider to kind of put them at different translucencies within the image. You can get kind of a ghosty type of feeling and get a lovely portrait collage. So now that I have my images in here, first off, I really don't like my background anymore with this. So I'm going to come down to my background. And actually, I'm just going to say from File. And I pulled in a red background before that I liked better. So I'm just going to go back to that. Say Open. Now it's smaller, significantly smaller than my current background. So I'm going to do the same thing, just size it until I'm happy with it. And I just want the red. I don't want the little Christmas ornaments. So there we are. And then I'm going to begin the process of maybe adding some frames to it and getting them to look good. So I would just come up to the layer that I want to work on and go to perhaps Topaz Adjust 5. I think I had some last use settings that I'm just going to go with here. So in Adjust 5, all I did was come in and change my adaptive exposure a little, change my white balance, and put a little bit of a border on here just to kind of separate the images from the background a little bit more. And so I'm just going to quickly come in and use those last use settings that I already was playing with. So I'm going to do that for each of the layers that I was working on. Say OK. It's great within our newer versions of our plugins. This last use settings can be really helpful for exactly this reason. If you want to apply the exact same settings to every single image that you take in, it's very simple just to go back in and just click on last use settings, and that is exactly what you're going to see. So I'm going to say OK, and now I've applied all of these settings to these 4 images. So again, this is how I would go about working with trying to do a photo collage within photoFXlab in this more simplified type of layers palette, and how I would incorporate the other plugins into this process. All right, lastly, I want to go over replacing the background and the landscape image, because I did say in my description that I would go over that, and this is also going to be a really good tutorial on when certain masking technologies are going to be better than others. So let's go ahead and X out of here and grab that. And then I'm going to turn the questions over to you. So if you have any questions that you want to start, you can start putting them into the questions module, and I'll be answering those starting in about 5 minutes. Okay, so here we have an image, a really nice landscape image, but you'll notice that because the light was so blue in the sky, it's very much reflected in the range, especially in the snow-topped areas. These blues really start to get very close in color. So because it is a pretty simple mask as far as in a simple background, my first reaction to do this mask would be to come to my edge-aware masking and just to quickly do it. Let me first get a background. When you're working with composites, it's important to think about a few things as far as when you're putting 2 images such as a background and a foreground together. You really want to think about the point of view, distance, color, and you really want to see the composition happening beforehand, and if it's almost there, then you can use certain techniques to really blend them together to make it a little bit more real. But when you have in a sky like I just put into this this mountain range, that's never going to look, because of the point of view, because of the distance of the clouds and the distance of the mountains, it's never going to really look right. So I do want to get one in there that kind of looks a little bit better. I will try for this guy, yeah. So this distance is a little bit more realistic for the image that we were working on. So let's get rid of that other sky image. So we're going to take this top image, and I'm going to first go to my tools and just scale it up a little, move it down, and this looks like it might fit pretty well in there. And now I'm going to drag this top layer, which is my background layer, below my foreground layer. I'm going to click back on my foreground layer, which is at the top, and this is when I would go to my masking tools and try to mask out this sky. So what I would do is, because I know these are so close in color, I'd take my brush size down quite a bit, my hardness down almost all the way, my edge aware all the way up, my brush value at 0, my flow at 1, and I just start going along the edge to see if it works. It's starting to look okay, but then watch what happens as I go over this area where the colors really start to become close. You lose all of these mountaintops. So this is an example of when the edge-aware masking starts to falter. It's, again, because of the technology behind it is it's trying to affect the color that the crosshairs is on, the middle of the brush. So whatever color that is, it's going to affect it. And if you have something that's very close in color, it will be affected, and it's not necessarily a good thing, such as in this particular image. So after seeing this and knowing that I'm already at the right brush size, I'm already at the right hardness, I'm at a pretty good way, then I would reset that, and I'd just quickly go into ReMask. And here's where I would use the traditional way of, with the green background, or my traditional way at least. Take my brush size down. And I just start painting along the edge where I want my ReMask to actually compute. When compositing a background with a foreground, there's a couple tools to know about within ReMask that are really going to help you blend the foreground in with the background. And we're going to be using those here in this particular example. So once I've painted the area where I want my program to compute and actually say, oh, okay, I have to think in this little area. Then I'm going to fill in the area that I want it to cut, which is my sky, and I'm just going to make a first compute mask. So I'm just going to click on compute mask, and you'll see that in the stronger contrasted areas over here on the left of the mountain range, it looks like a really strong mask, pretty good. But then as we go towards the right, where those colors are starting to blend together really, really nicely, or not nicely, you'll see that it starts to get a little bit of rough and not a great mask. So we will have to go work with this just a little bit. Let me go ahead and go to my split screen view, and I'm going to go into my tri-map and my keep. So you'll see along this keep area that it's just pretty jagged, and you actually do see some of the background of the sky that's still attached to it, and we don't want that. It's kind of a ghosting, and we don't want that at all. So here I would use this single color selection tool again. The single color selection tool is great for skies and any sort of halos that you might have along the edges. You'll also notice over here where the mask looks really good on the left, you still have a bit of a halo from the sky because it is such a brighter color, and so it's kind of stuck to those edges. So the first thing I would do is use my single color selection cut brush, because I want to cut that color out. I would come over to my tri-map, get as close to those mountains as I could with my eyedropper, and click. You'll notice over here that my actual tool turned to that blue sky color, and all I'm going to do is now take my cut brush, take it up a little bit, and I'm going to go over that edge, and you'll see that a lot of that blue will just disappear. As we get over here to the right, it's a little bit more, but there we are. So now you'll see that over here on the right, a lot of that halo that we were seeing has disappeared. There are still some problem areas, and I'm going to show you how we resolve those as well. But we're going to go over here to the right and do this one more time along the area over here. It's a very quick way to get rid of some of these colors. And we've eliminated a lot of the halo of the sky that was happening in kind of our rougher area of the mask. However, we're still seeing some problems within the actual mountain range, the tops. We're seeing some areas that aren't looking very good. So what I want to do is now go through that same process that we just went through, except with the single color selection keep. So I'm just going to say keep, and I'm going to click on the mountain range area and just start painting along the edge. Now, my range is at about 10, so it's not going to select everything, so I'm going to do this several times, just kind of filling in this area with the right, giving it a little bit more of a good idea of what it needs to be doing, that it needs to be keeping these tones and not eliminating them. Okay. And one more time with the single color selection cut, because over here on the right I'm seeing some problems, so I'm going to do that, cut that, and now we have a very good clean area that we're working with. Actually, one little area I want to work on. There we are. Okay, so now we have a pretty good mask for this mountain range, which was so close in color to the sky, using ReMask. However, when we're compositing, again, we need to remember about the actual blending it in together and working with making sure that it's a natural blend. And over here on the left, you still see a small halo. Let me zoom in a little bit. A halo of this sky attached to the mountain, even though we've already used this red cut brush, which helped quite a bit, but not completely. So here's where I would go down to my foreground color tools. These are really going to be helpful when you're working with background replacements. Please note that you do need to be in your keep view. At least one of your views need to be keep to be able to use these foreground color brushes. The first one is the recovery tool. The recovery tool, as you take this up, will try to recover more of the foreground color and get rid of less of that halo that's going on. However, there are many times when it just doesn't quite get it with these really strong halos, and it hasn't done it very well over here on the right, and you can kind of see that. Now, if you'll keep your eye on, let me scroll in just a little bit more. We're at 100% here. So again, this is the trouble area where I'm talking about. So now at this point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this high quality checkbox for my recovery. So currently the recovery is not doing a good enough job on its own at its normal quality. So we have included this high quality on the latest version of ReMask. It is a little bit slow. That's why it's not the default recovery. But look at how much it helped over here on the right. And now I can actually take this up even more and watch this. Once you do it once, you don't have to do it again. So here's the recovery. It's pretty low on the slider. Now just watch the line along the mountaintops as I take this up. It just fills it in. It's so cool. It really works very well. So you just have to click that high quality once, and you're usually really excited about what it actually ends up coming up with. Sometimes it makes the edge a little bit hard, so then you can come in, you can desaturate it just a little, and that's going to help you blend it back in with the background. This is important when you're putting a really different type of background in your image. So those are the couple tools in ReMask that you really need to know about when compositing. Once you're happy, you just press OK, and voila, we have a new background. Here's before, here's after, again before and after. And then you can, at this point, for each individual layer, come in and make it a little bit more unique. For this particular sky, it's still not all that exciting to me, so I might come in and actually play with my dynamic slider up here and play with my contrast and maybe my saturation and get it to go a little bit more exciting. And then at that point it doesn't really fit with my foreground, so then I would come into my foreground and kind of do the same thing. I would try to blend it together with my background to really make it work. So maybe take that saturation up just a little, make that contrast come down, dynamics go up. And you get the idea. You can really play with it all within this photoFXlab too, but you could take this as easily into one of the plugins or just use your adjustments in your host program to blend it in together. So here's where we started. And we changed the foreground very quickly just now in those adjustments and brought back in a different type of more exciting background. So that is how you know kind of which masking tools to use if you do have photoFXlab and ReMask. Again, some of the questions coming through have been, when should I use which one? Which one's better? And I don't think either one is better. I just think that they're both used for different images, they're both best in different situations. So I hope that helps to kind of see the difference there. All right, everybody, thank you so much for joining me here today. I'm going to go ahead and let you guys go. I hope that this gives you some idea of how easy it can be to composite images using these two programs and then some other Topaz programs as well. Have a great weekend. Bye-bye.